Hello, Wisconsin! Hello, Waukesha! Hello, Richland Center, Wisconsin Rapids, Stevens Point, Wausau, Amory, and Madison tonight. Jane, how you doing? The last day of September. Goodbye, September. Hello, Q4. For those of us who ever worked in sales, who think about the world in quarters, I hope all those salespeople out there, I hope you close your numbers out for the quarter. I hope you get that bonus before you go back to zero on Monday. All right. Well, it is Friday, TGIF. It's been a week. And what we're doing on Fridays these days is recapping Wisconsin headlines, specifically Wisconsin political headlines, because sometimes in the middle of the week, we have guests, we have other plans, we don't always get to the breaking news of the big headlines, and because sometimes we let everyone else huff and puff about it, and then we have cool, calm, collected takes at the end of the week. And I know this guy is cool, calm, and collected. Our guest for this hour is the guy who makes everything at Civic Media run. Maybe not everything, but a lot of things.
I do a lot of stuff.
He does a lot of stuff. He's a producer. He's a electrician. He's a fixer of things. He's a host of Dueling Tangents with Luke and Brian. He's the Brian half of Luke and Brian.
Every now and then I'm there.
You actually held the show by yourself yesterday.
Yeah, we had a fun talk. It was good.
It was just you, just talking to yourself?
No,
I know, you would have
I had a couple calls.
But our guest is Brian Kelly, is here with me for the hour. Hello, sir.
Hi. How's it going, everyone?
How you doing?
I'm great.
How are you?
I'm going to be heading off right to another place that we're going to be expanding to, so your list of things is going to be bigger.
My list of cities to list off?
Yeah.
Pretty exciting.
Eventually, we're just going to say all of Wisconsin.
Yeah, so when I start the show, I just say, hello, Wisconsin. It'll be actually correct.
Yeah, I'm planting the seeds that will grow into a larger, liberal takeover of Wisconsin, just like everybody has been worried about.
Yes, we're just really on the wrong course because those liberals that have all of the power in this state.
We said, well, you know what? Why don't we just do the thing that they're worried about? So, all right, hooray for us.
All right, so many places to start.
I know there's so many things that have happened, and it's a veritable storm of, like my daughter likes to say, it's a hurricane of problems. And by the way, that's no insensitive to folks who are dealing with a literal hurricane right now in Florida.
Yes.
My goodness.
I did not actually see any more footage or if any more updates besides what I started to see yesterday, but it got classified, it re-upped as a hurricane now and not just a tropical storm. So
no matter what, it's all messed up. Mother Nature just doesn't care.
Does not care about your feelings.
Yeah, does not. If you ever read any of the Shogun series, it's pretty much the end of every book. I don't know how to end this, so big giant tsunami, everybody's dead.
Well, and I think that whenever I think about climate change, it's like Mother Earth's going to be fine. We're the ones. We're the ones who will expire because we will no longer be able to inhabit the Earth. But she'll do just fine without us. Mm-hmm. And but someone who has said on record that climate change is BS, but I can't say it on the radio, is our senior Senator Ron Johnson.
Yes.
He's actually a year ago, there was CNN released a video of him talking to an audience that was laughing. And he said, I don't know about you guys, but I think climate change is, as Lord Monckton said, bull. And then he mouthed the expletive. He couldn't even bring himself to actually say the end of that phrase. But then he said in a statement after I think the video was released, my statements are consistent. I'm not a climate change denier, but I also am not a climate change alarmist. Climate is not static. It is always change and will always change, which is wrong. There is overwhelming scientific evidence that climate change, the climate crisis is man-made. And I'd also love, before we get to the news that happened this week about this, that's the background, love that he wouldn't, in an audience of peers or like people who were supporting him, I love that he wouldn't say the full phrase, that he had to mouth it. It reminds me of the people who still think saying "Let's go, Brandon" is like getting away with something.
Yeah.
It's like, you can just say it, right? Like that's actually what the First Amendment protects, is that you can criticize and curse at our president and you're not going to get arrested.
When you're not a snowflake, you are totally. I don't get that. I don't get it at all. I find it childish, but I find the whole thing childish. But that's just.
So anyways, so fast forward to this week, and there is a 6-foot statue made of manure of Ron Johnson touring the state.
Yeah, and it's climate change activists.
The next gen pack and Move On. They hosted events around Madison. It's an 80-pound statue. So I'm sorry, they're calling it a statue.
It's a statue, and it's a 180-pound statue. And
it's 180 pounds?
Yes, and the quote was, "What's the difference between Ron Johnson and a 180-pound statue of manure of Ron Johnson?" And the answer is about 4 pounds.
I mean, I appreciate the joke. I do appreciate the joke.
It's not my joke. I think.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like, it's like, sometimes from the activist wing, you never know how much they're good at using humor, and that's a pretty good one.
I'm telling you, activists need to employ people like me when I have time. Absurdists, things that like a while back, they all the guy who did Cards Against Humanity had everybody mail potatoes to Ron Johnson.
I remember that.
And, Ron Johnson sidestepped it and just, had a P.O. box or whatever, and then they just forwarded it. They just a bunch of potatoes there. But I thought, I like those type of absurdist things trying to get at people like that.
Yeah. Well, so this happened this week, and I mean, I guess it's one of those things where it's something that creates publicity. I think my first instinct is like, really? This is the best that we got. But it creates publicity, and if any publicity is good publicity, we're here talking about it now. There's an article in HuffPo. There's an article.
They had a happy hour event last night.
And so I don't know, but does it change anyone's mind?
No.
So it's
the
just
people
a
that are going to
stunt.
go there are like, F. Ron Johnson anyway. But I'd like to see. It's funny to see it.
I mean, it's pretty. I actually, to be fair to the artist who created it, they did a pretty good job considering the material they were using.
Yeah, and I gotta say, that's a commitment to go and use that material, and to get that detail out of that material is, again, a commitment. Because again, you have to keep it a certain level of moisture. I'm assuming it's not as mutable as clay, because
well, they added some resin to it apparently, and so maybe that makes it a little bit stickier.
Okay. Yeah,
and how you mold it. Because if you look at the picture that was posted, I mean, it's posted on a lot of different things. Like I said, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel obviously did an article about it in different Wisconsin outlets. But the fact that it got national coverage is like, all right, well, like, shock value, I guess. And so people actually talked about it. I still don't necessarily think it's not my cup of tea. But but you
notice how we're not going, is it offensive at all? Because again, the guy, pretended to use a cell phone when
I can see that you're not talking to anyone.
And then he didn't even bother continuing going, well, I'll talk to you later. He just went, put his hand out. Just a ridiculous human being. And the thing is, like, he used to come into the Devil's Advocates when I was producing all the time, right? And before Trump, he would come in and disagree and things like that. And then Trump came along and he would still disagree. Like, and in between commercials, he'd say, this guy's kind of ridiculous, but we're trying to work things out. I like the tax thing. And we talked about the taxes and we disagreed on taxes. We disagreed on, but we still had the same reality. That his take on climate change was, all right, look, I'm not going to do anything drastic right now. But then it started getting a little bit crazier as it went on. And I noticed, the guy used to show up with a 6-pack. His body guy was there. We talked. It was cordial. It was, we disagree, but we're cordial and we're country club cordial type of thing. And somewhere after the July 4th going to Moscow, he started being different and saying a little bit more crazy stuff. And now at this point, if I saw him on the street, I'd be like, who are you? What happened to you? I'm more like, there are people like Marjorie Taylor Greene who have always been like a little bit, but Ron Johnson was actually, disagreeable, yes, and would probably go and sell his mother for a little bit extra money. That's fine, but But that's also, you agree that there's a mother and there's a price for your mother, and you can sell that. You know what I mean? It's not like, hey, COVID. Everybody in the scientific is telling you COVID gets fought this way, and he goes, oh, you can just gargle, because people get mad about it, and he follows whatever he needs to do to stay in power. I don't get it. Exactly. The guy has so much, he spreads so much misinformation, and I don't understand to what end or to what impetus, especially since he started off as a reasonable-ish kind of guy.
Well, it's interesting because I've talked to Bill Glauber about this from Journal Sentinel, and he says that he's always been like this. So it's interesting that you have a different take, that you feel like it's been curving.
I guess he cared more about the facade when I first met him. How about that?
Just like Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I have a feeling that Aaron Rodgers was always as weird as he is now. He just wasn't as comfortable because he wasn't the king of the North. Well, yeah. And now that he's won 4 MVPs, he's like, I'm going to do what I want.
Well, it's after, with how many fiancés has he gone through? At least just call them your girlfriend, man. It's fine. It's fine. They know, and then just be honest about it. But no, I've been immunized. Come on, dude. Just stand up and say, I'm like Kirk Cousins, and let's move on. He looks like Slippery Pete. You remember that episode of Seinfeld, Slippery Pete? The Russian guy. He plays everything. Anyway, he looks like Slippery Pete.
I'll look it up at the commercial. All right. Well, in that case, we are going to go to commercial, and when we come back, it's the most expensive race in the country. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Not NASCAR.
What?
Not NASCAR.
Will you check and see if you can pull up the just to see if we can do anything with the camera, because his camera to me looks blurry right now.
I look stupid.
The new camera we're using looks crystal clear.
Me. It's probably my fault. What do you do? I can. Yes, you would lie to me.
Is the most expensive race Formula One?
No, I'm the most expensive political race.
Oh, I thought we were actually talking because you said.
Yeah,
Aw, I missed the joke.
I'm
Darn it.
So I don't know if you want to go into the Dell software that we opened the other day and see if that can change anything. But it's, I feel like he should be clear. Like when we were playing with Greg the other day, it felt like we figured out a way for to make it clear out. Otherwise, we just have to get all these, which are really expensive.
Mm-hmm. Sure, you can talk him into it though, because you're doing 2 here, 2 in Madison.
Well, it just depends on who else is going to actually take the time to make content.
Eventually,
like
Pat will.
I wouldn't be. Pat's camera looks good.
So I have to. Okay, never mind. Did you see that? Cool.
So I'd zoom in. So
and if there's nothing to be done, then that's what it is. What it is. But like, I just feel like when we were playing with the other day, it looked clearer.
Yeah, we also left the light on with Greg.
We tried the light on, and it didn't make much of a difference. It could just be like we don't have enough natural light right now.
I think so, because all the signs we put last time are still there. Like it hasn't changed since. It looks the same. Actually, it's better with it off.
Yeah, that's what I thought too when we tried it.
Better with it off now.
Yeah, everything's just. It's weird though, because when I'm looking at it through the webcam, like
that looks fine.
It looks fine, but then I look on Zoom, it looks a little different.
Zoom is ruining everything once again.
Check the Facebook restream and see what it looks like in there.
Okay.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin, Brey, Jay Madnair on the board, TGIF. Our guest this hour is actor, improviser, funny man, great Russian accent.
Well, I sometimes do. I do play. I do speak Russian for a while and do play it for a year.
It helps that you're 6'5" and shop at the big and tall, because you also just look like you could throw someone out of a club real fast.
Yeah, and the thing is, I look larger and stuff like that, but I've been taken out by somebody a third my size.
Well,
My buddy,
jiu-jitsu?
It was a lot of momentum music. I ran at him, and he just kind of threw me over. He was one of my best friends. And the guy I would have in my back in a fight. That's a longer story.
That's a different story, because we only got 8 minutes in this segment, so we're going to keep talking. But we're with Brian Kelly all hour. We're talking about some of the political headlines out of Wisconsin this week. And as of this morning, what would you do with $55 million? Jane, what would you do? Both of you can answer.
I have a plan for a theater that I want to build. So if anyone has a couple $1 million that want to throw at me, I mean, I've built a bunch of radio stations. I can build a theater.
Fair.
I have a line with a bunch of people in Chicago that are really talented and stuff, and here that are really talented. So I can shuffle through a bunch of stuff. I have an idea.
All right.
And I still probably have money left over.
Probably. I love that you think that North Dakota is that cheap. The second most amount of bars per capita after Wisconsin. I do know that.
Well, I think like when they were building the pipeline up there, they're trying to get McDonald's workers up there. They were offering like 20 plus an hour plus a free HD TV and a bunch of other things for signing on to work at McDonald's up there, just because they needed people.
We need people. Wow. You did not take it? Pass. That's a big, that was the big draw.
It's called The Forest.
All right. Well, I'd throw that number out because that has how much money has been spent since the August primary in our gubernatorial race between the two sides. It's $55 million, making it the most expensive general election in the country, which kind of surprised me because, one, I think we talked earlier this week that while right now our U.S. Senate campaign has run the most ads so far, at like something around 14,000. The gubernatorial Wisconsin race was third in how many ads it's run after Florida and Texas. So I'm a little surprised that Wisconsin is outspending Tony Evers and Tim Michels are outspending Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke, but here we are.
That's insane.
In the Senate race, a total of $89 million. Well, so that must be the most expensive gubernatorial race because a total of $89 million has been dropped in the Senate race since the August primary. Yeah. And
it's basically you're spending almost $200 million or less to go and basically have ads argue with each other during your football games. That's what happens. At least. Because
is there anything else that money goes towards? Besides media buys?
If you're going to place it in during a nationally televised football game, and even if it's a regional buy, you're still spending. They're not going to go. Oh, it's political.
I know, but it's like, it does when you raise that much money? Does it go? I mean, obviously, the staff gets paid something, but not a lot. And where else? Like, what is the budget breakdown for campaigns? And is it? If someone knows, if someone has actually worked on a campaign that knows what the percentages, obviously how big the budgets are changes, but I would love to know, shoot us a text, 844-967-2789, because I would love to know what the percentage breakdown is per category, typically on a major campaign like this.
I wonder if any of them have been really audited.
I have no idea.
Because, again,
I mean, they have to because everyone's like, Shantia Lewis got. I mean, that was at an alderman's, right? Don't you think that
they changed the entire way that we do business with third-party groups because Governor Walker was being investigated in the John Doe investigation, so they just changed the law and said burn the records instead, just so they can continue doing what we're the only state in the country that has different laws about in-state running with and coordinating with third-party groups because Scott Walker said so.
I wasn't living here during that point.
You it's a long story.
Is
we don't
it?
have the time to get John Doe investigation. That was Scott Walker, and Michael Gambon comes up in that too because he was.
You got 2 minutes. How fast can you recap that story?
Oh, that's so long. All right, so essentially
90 seconds.
All right, I'm not going to get it. Look it up, get into it. Actually, honestly, you know who can do that for you in probably an entire day is Mike Krug because he's got an elevator speech that can turn it. He's got that whole.
You got the whole thing down.
Yes, and I don't want to misquote anything in the next 90 seconds or next 30 seconds or
whatever you have left.
Whatever it is. Time has no meaning for me anymore. Did you know that?
Which is weird because working in radio, you kind of have to be aware of what the time is.
Yeah, but you said October's tomorrow, and I know that the 3rd is on Monday, but I had no idea that tomorrow was October, even though the math, if I ever thought about it, was that tomorrow's the 1st.
The years keep coming and they don't stop coming.
Sharp as a sack of wet mice, this guy. Good thing I'm running point on this whole expansion.
All right, well, we're going to take a break for the bottom of the hour news, and when we come back, we're going to talk about whether or not someone should or should not step down. And also, don't text things if you're in public office. This is As Goes Wisconsin. How does it look on Facebook?
It's. It's taking a minute. Yeah, on YouTube. Doesn't look horrible, but I see what you mean. It does look a little blurry.
Do you still have that light in your car?
What light?
The ring light?
No, that was Greg.
Ah, fuck!
Same chair, though.
That is the same chair.
That's hilarious.
Did you get to look at those lighting things?
No, I'll do it this weekend.
It's all right.
It looks okay.
There's 2 that have tripods. There's one that has a clip.
Yeah, it doesn't look horrible.
It'll be interesting to see how it
Translate to video.
how it exports.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I guess for now, just if whatever's funny that we say today. I mean, he's the only one in person.
Okay.
Next week we'll have.
It's also the reason we don't have the GAB anymore.
I only know what the GAB is because I hear your promo like
Government Accountability
every day.
Board. They had, instead of the Wisconsin Elections Commission, they used to have a panel of retired justices that are nonpartisan. They're the Elections Commission, essentially, the Government Accountability Board. They're the ones who investigate things.
Yeah.
They investigated Scott Walker for coordinating with third-party groups to give him more money, essentially. Dark money that couldn't be traced.
Got it.
And Gableman was the Supreme Court justice at the time. It came before the Supreme Court, but in the fallout of it, Walker got rid of the Government Accountability Board, and the Republicans installed the Wisconsin Elections Commission, which has 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats. It's designed to stalemate, but it's all because of the dude tried to get more money than he should have in elections. Thank God it's not the fucking Metashare.
You hit the what?
Metashare commercial. Yeah, so it saves a lot of money and it's great. So call Bible or 900.
Do we ever help them with their copy, or they just come in and do
No,
their
they do
thing?
their AP News. That's what they send to us through satellite. That's what they send to everybody. That's national. Professionals.
I sent Sage the Facebook link. I was like, I'm not going to tell you which one I like the most, but you tell me which one you like the most, because we have 3 different cameras right now. So he can see it for himself.
Yeah.
And then he can buy 3 of these.
I like that you were like, oh, I like this one, but you got this new thing, and then you got to try this one. Oh.
I literally sat down, I was like, oh, this is, but like, it has, do you know what an Osmo Pocket is? It's similar to that. Although I have one. I wonder if I should just what if we could use mine on a
Cosmopolitan?
Osmopolitan. No. It's,
I make a really good Cosmopolitan.
isn't it just like 2 ingredients? What else goes in a Cosmo?
Citrus vodka.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin on this beautiful fall Friday, the last day of September. We're getting into the fall. We're getting to the end of 2021. We're getting so much closer to the election. So the conversations around these political ads will be over, but the politics won't end because this is Wisconsin. And 6 months after November, we will have the Supreme Court elections. So we never really get a reprieve in this state. For those who pay attention to every election, which you should. You should pay attention to every election.
Yeah, funny enough, our Supreme Court justices are elected.
Because elections are supposed to have consequences in that often when we elect a new governor, there are certain positions that are not elected. They are appointed by the governor. Except in our state over the last, the first term of Tony Evers, he appointed a lot of people. And a lot of them did not get,
not even approval.
Did not get approved by the legislature, including, I think, probably the person who's gotten the most attention out of refusing to step down from his seat.
Yeah, the figurehead of pighead in this.
Yes, is Fred Pren, who has been a controversial figure in the natural resources world because he has refused to leave the board of the DNR.
Yeah, and he coordinated with the Senate to make sure that happened.
Yes, and
because it's a fun catch-22 here in Wisconsin.
And it went to court. It was upheld by the Wisconsin Supreme Court, which ruled that he could remain in his seat unless the governor could find a cause to remove him. So the governor did appoint someone else that never got approved, so he never stepped down. And you know what? Actually, now we're doing your show. Slight tangent. Do you know what Pren's day job is?
He's a dentist.
He's a dentist.
I want to be a dentist.
And a gun store owner.
Oh.
Because those two go hand in hand.
I'm going to shoot your tooth.
When I read that, I was like, a dentist and a gun store owner on the DNR board.
I'm
those
sure
are
he
3
has
things.
All of our best interests.
I don't know where the Venn diagram of those things. I guess maybe a little bit
Serial killer.
Gun with.
I'm just throwing allegedly.
Hunting with DNR makes more sense. But yeah. So anyways.
By the way, most hunters want the wildlife preserved.
Oh yeah.
Like actual real hunters want to talk about harvesting the deer rather than I killed 15 things. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's the majority of hunters. Let's talk about that.
So absolutely.
Yes, and they understand they're the ones closest to the nature.
Yeah. So he has said up until the story this week that broke, that his decision to remain on the board wasn't a political one. I think a lot of people are like, really? But then this week, there are released texts and emails that made it clear that partisan politics played basically the main role in the ongoing controversy. And
it's crazy how that happens.
And all I can think of, because everything's about me, all I can think of is this is why I could never be in public office. Because I am not a disciplined person.
No.
I can barely filter myself on the radio, let alone what I text my friends.
I'd have a GoFundMe for my fines for swearing
so,
on the legislative board. I would stand up with what is wrong with you?
Because, the things that I just say to try to make my friends laugh should not be for public consumption. And so the fact that there would ever be a public records request for my text because I'd be in public office, I don't want to put myself in that position. However, as someone who is refusing to leave public office, he has put himself in that position. And there are now plenty of receipts of him basically LOLing his way of how he's never going to step down from the seat so long as Evers is governor.
So you're telling me that the legislature that, before the governor even became the governor, before he even stepped into office, conspired with the outgoing governor to limit his powers in general, as well as the powers of the attorney general. The people that had a lame duck session and swept in less powers for the incoming governor because they didn't trust him. Those guys, you're saying that they made a political decision to hamstring how the government works underneath this said governor? Because it's not just Fred Prent.
I know.
It's 150 appointees. And it's not stuff like, these aren't all political appointments. Some of them are like Milwaukee Technical College. There was an article the other day. There were 3 of them that are just sitting there on the board, but they can't vote because they're sitting there kind of in training. How patronizing is that? While the people who are still sitting there from the Walker administration are continuing in their terms because the legislature refuses to even take up. They're not even voting yes or no up and down on these people. They're just not even taking it up. They're Mitch McConnelling their way to not doing anything and hamstringing the governor. And the stupid thing is, and this is what bothers the heck out of me, more than anything, is that people who are voting for Republicans who are doing this, they are assuming that you are too dumb to know that they are hamstringing the governor to make sure he fails. They don't care whether your Milwaukee Area Technical College works. They don't care whether the water is on or not. They only care whether Evers loses or not, and that's it. They don't care about things working correctly. And 150 people sitting there because these lazy-ass SOBs don't go to work since March, and they can't even be bothered to say, you want to be political about it? You want to be a jerk about it? You want to hamstring the governor? Fine. Say no to everything. Show up, do your job, and be on record and say no to everything. But they don't. And you know what? You know why they keep doing it? Because these idiots, and I have to say idiots because they assume that you are an idiot because you don't know or don't care that the government doesn't work because of what they're doing. You still vote for them.
But whose responsibility is it then? Because I think about this a lot as far as, I work in the media and I can't even keep up sometimes. In Wisconsin, we have slow news weeks.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of this stuff of how the government works is boring, right?
Yeah.
And so the sensationalist, it's a lot more fun to talk about a Ron Johnson poop machine or poop statue than
why we end up doing it in the first place.
Yes. And so the assumption that we should trust the government to just work, and the reason why there are, because there's an argument of should we have less elections and more appointments because putting the responsibility at the feet of voters to know all of these different positions, what they do, and make informed voting choices is a lot to ask for people who are also living in a capitalist society who have to work a lot. And, and so the responsibility of knowing what the superintendent of the Department of Education does. And so knowing why, the fact that we only have a 7% turnout or something like that for when Underly got elected is because we just had the 2020 election. People get exhausted. And so I also understand that there is room for some of these roles that are elected right now being appointed instead of elected. But then you have to step down when a new person is in charge and appoints a new person.
That's how things work, and they have always worked. And that's how things get done. That's how the machine continues going. That's how things like when you complain about how, it took so long for them to process this thing. Well, do they have enough people? Do they have someone in office that wants to process this? Evers put out this new thing and it doesn't work because Well, there's not enough people to process it. Well, people were complaining about the unemployment.
As where my mind went to.
Unemployment.
Which was a decades-old problem.
Yes.
And yes, I guarantee, because I remember following that story. And was there enough attention from the Evers administration on that problem? No. Because I talked to guys who were, there's specifically an unemployment lawyer who works in Madison, and I talked to him about it because I wanted to do more, like a video on it back in 2020. And he said, this is something that's been decades old. Like during the Walker administration, the this whole department got turned upside down as far as how we process claims. And they process claims by assuming that you as an individual trying to seek unemployment is trying to cheat the system. So you're treated like a criminal as soon as you enter it. Yeah. And that didn't,
just like Brett Favre did.
Big shock. That didn't scale well when the unemployment insurance, unemployment claims were blowing up, because everyone who was working there was trained to treat everyone like they were trying to scam the system, on top of a technology that was from like the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hamstringing. It's been hamstrung for a while, and then you complain about it and say, why didn't this get worked out? Well, nobody cared about it. My first thought after the 2016 election when Trump won, everyone was like, oh, how did this happen? I'm like, honestly, at the time, I was like, it honestly really doesn't matter, because most people can tell you who, Hillary Clinton is and who Donald Trump is, but they couldn't tell you who's on their school board. Most of them could barely tell you their teachers' names, let alone who the principal is. You know what I mean? Nobody knows who the mayor is or who their older person is. Very few people do, and very few people even vote in those races, even if they have, they do the upper ballot, but they don't necessarily fill out the bottom because they don't know. Most people don't know those things. Those are the people that do your roads. Those are the people that salt your roads so you can drive out in the Wisconsin winters. Those are the people that make things run. And for the most part, it doesn't matter what party they're from, because at the end of the day, they have to turn the water on and off. Mm-hmm. And most people don't. But most people don't know those things because, again, we have to live day to day in a capitalist society where we're expected to work 24/7, and we're supposed to, but then, you're tired after work and you have to watch TV, and you don't have time to absorb.
This is not as interesting as American Idol.
Exactly. And
I just want to watch people sing.
Yeah. And by the way,
can you sing?
I can't. My brother can. My brother's an opera singer.
Really?
He's really good. And I can sing as other people really well. I can't sing as myself really well.
What does that sound like? Like you have to be doing an impression of someone to be on key?
Kind of, yeah. I guess I can do Kermit, and I sing better as Kermit, but I actually hit notes that I wouldn't be able to hit with my regular voice. Mostly, it's probably confidence, because I always had this thing about singing and stuff. But yeah,
all right,
it's weird. Bed, Leroy Brown, baddest man in the whole damn town, bigger than an old King Kong. Meaner than a junkyard dog. You see, he's a bad Leroy Brown, but you understand the bad Leroy Brown. He has sensitive feelings inside. He doesn't want to always be bad, but sometimes everybody says you have to be bad because it is his job to go and lay the law down in this town. So.
Brian Kelly, ladies and gentlemen, he's our guest all hour to recap things that are going on in Wisconsin news and politics. And we've been talking about kind of the bigger picture of Fred Pren not stepping down from the DNR board, and then his text messages that were released this week, basically confirming what I think a lot of us already knew, that this was a political move, not a
massive scale.
And it's just what I think there was an op-ed in Wisconsin Examiner this week that was basically like, what is it going to take for us to get over these petty partisan politics to actually get things done?
There's a reason
because I don't see, works. I mean, even if let's fast forward to a month, 5 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now.
6 weeks from now, good luck with that.
And Tony Evers wins again. Is it just 4 more years of all of this? Of just the, special sessions that last 13 seconds, nothing actually getting done, things getting sabotaged just to in the hopes that he looks like a failed governor. Does at what point would something actually change?
And by the way, isn't that what we're hoping for? Aren't we hoping
I'm not.
for that? No, I mean, my point is like, isn't that like the best case scenario at the end of the day here? Like, do you honestly think that there's enough, push even, if they didn't spend as much on Evers and they spend it all down ballot and really try to work to go and get the legislature pushed, how much if they put on a full-on assault, like competed in every single race up and down the ballot, how much of a push could you really make? Because again, gerrymandering works because people vote the same all the time. What is it going to take to move them across? Do we have to go door to door and say, look at this, isn't this bad? Don't you want to change this? I mean, is that what it takes?
I don't know. It's a good question, but we can't answer it right now because we got to go to a break. We got one more segment with Brian Kelly before he drives off to Oshkosh to do more things that I don't understand. Stick with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin. France? What did I miss?
Trying to think of how I'm going to destroy my stomach this time.
What's your go-to usually?
I'm so sick of fast food at this point now. I like the Culver's cod dinner. We're getting that with a chicken noodle soup. That really does it. But burgers anymore. Arby's was great, but then you have to make that choice. Like you're like, I'm all in. Today I might as well eat fucking grease because I'm having Arby's.
Man, I don't know the last time I ate at an Arby's.
Did you Popeyes? You had Rochester's Deli?
Is that the one that's right over here?
Yeah.
I think I went there once and got
Reuben's Magic.
I think I wanted a bagel, but they randomly didn't have bagels. I was like, is there a good bagel place around here?
I don't know. Best bagel I've had in a while is at Pick and Save.
Really?
Yeah, they have a bakery, so make your own bagels. Also, it's just...
No? To run their offices? I mean...
to run for office. Like, you get paid to run for office.
Well, you get paid your salary. And if you're not doing your job... Yeah, that's a good one. We'll start with that. And then we'll close out a little bit with Milwaukee. What's your official title now at Civic Media? Do you have one?
Regional operations. I'm a pantologist.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. What was that, Jane? Talk to my lawyer.
Yeah.
All right. We were talking about suing. Yeah, that's true. That's a good, I see the association you were going for. We're here wrapping things up with Brian Kelly, Regional Operations Manager for Civic Media.
I'll take that.
That's his official title right now. But he does a lot of things here. He's a producer. He is a host with Dueling Tangents with Luke and Brian after this show. But I'm guessing you're not going to be on today's show?
No, it's William Walter today.
Oh, great.
He's filling in today and on Monday.
There you go.
Luke is out of town.
Luke is out of town. He also another person who does a lot of things at Civic Media.
Yeah.
And so that's the startup mentality of everyone wears lots of hats.
I have a giant hat. He does too. And we have many hats for that one hat.
Yep. And every day something gets solved.
Yeah.
But the list never gets shorter.
And it's never the thing you thought it was at the beginning of the
Exactly. Well, we have a texter who had a question that we'll see if we can answer. So if I understand the question correctly, so read it one more time. I think no. I mean, I think you can maybe give yourself so there's two different things. If you were an incumbent, so you have your salary that the government pays you, and technically you cannot campaign while you're working for the government.
Which is why
they hang it up in March.
That's why they hang it up.
So if they had not done that, you need to separate time that you were doing campaign activities and time that you were on the clock for the government. Now,
ask Scott Walker about that.
For the actual fundraising you do for your campaign, I do think you can give yourself a salary.
I don't know, honestly. The person who would know for sure is Matt Rothschild at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign.
You think he's listening right now? Hi, Matt.
He usually does. He's fantastic too.
Well, Matt, if you're listening right now, or if someone else who knows the answer to that question, I think you can, out of the money that you raise, you can give yourself a salary.
I guess at the end of the day, so Kevin Nicholson, right?
Yep.
Ran for governor. His no better friend, he's got an office right down the street here. This guy ran for governor, and you could say, dude never had a chance. I mean, from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, we never thought. And Timothy Rampton, we never had a chance. That dude was more of an ideologue. And
he actually won the primary.
Ooh.
Joking.
No,
if you ask him.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The point is that he ran on denying the election, and he actually got elected, which is funny. But my point is we knew that neither of them had any chance. But they raised a whole bunch of money. Like Kevin Nicholson raised a lot of money. What's the point? What does that money do?
I mean, it sits in a war chest, right? And then you're like,
that's it.
I mean, because that was the whole thing of why he stepped out politically, because he's a young guy.
No,
and if he had, because now, supposedly him and Ron Johnson hate each other. And now the headline this morning is that he's backing Ron Johnson or helping in one way or another. And so it's like the bigger political game, right? I would imagine. I have my opinions, but I am not a political strategist. I don't work on the inside of the Democratic Party. I don't know how these things and the relationships and the the favors and whose turn it is and all the stuff that you see on dramas of how these things work. I don't know how that works, but I can imagine that he's planning to run again for something, and so it sits in a fund that is dedicated for Nicholson for Wisconsin.
His family maxed out to his opponent when he was running for Senate. His family maxed out to Tammy Baldwin. That's really all you need to know about Kevin Nicholson. His own family couldn't put partisan politics aside and give money to. They couldn't even just abstain. Just so let's let our son run. No, they all gave all their money they could to Tammy Baldwin.
I didn't know that story.
Oh yeah, Kevin Nicholson's family doesn't even want him to be in office. But my point is that dude's out there, he's raising money and sloshing it around. And we all talk about we got to get all the money out of politics. What are we doing to do that? What are we like? We talk about we talked about in the first segment. What is the budget for these things? How does this get broken down? Where does all that money go? How much money gets spent on ads? Does it all have to be spent on ads? Do you have to spend all this money at certain points? I mean, honestly. The general public, we don't know the specifics of it. The general public definitely doesn't know. And again, when you start going, well, this campaign raised this much money and this campaign raised this much money. Well, what does that mean to anybody? At the end of the day, it's just, it turns people off and gets more cynical. For me, I think that's the reason Donald Trump wins, because he comes out and says things that he's not talking political speak. He's not saying, well, we didn't lose as much as we suffered from an acute lack of winning. That's a political statement. You know what I mean? Like who just talk like a person. And to that effect, you were talking about, again, sum up everything in the show again. We were talking about texts and things. Well, for me, I have no shame. I don't care. I don't care what people, I care what people think of me to the extent, I care what people think of me, but at the end of the day, if I made a mistake, I'll own up to it.
Yeah.
It's so much easier if you just own up to it and say, yeah, my bad. I did that wrong. I'll do it better next time. If I don't do it better next time, I'll feel even worse. But that's what people want. People don't want to. When I interview politicians, I want to ask them, okay, what was your big mistake? What did you learn from? What? Give me, and they all hedge. Every single one of them, even the people that I know that are
like in an interview, and you're like, "What would you say your greatest weakness is?" I just work too hard.
Yeah, that type of stuff. And I think people are yearning for someone who has a little bit more of a real speak, enough to the point where they were like, Donald Trump seems great.
Well, I think that's every once in a while you have someone who comes across that at least seemingly has that much confidence, security. I think it seems like John Fetterman comes off in that way. That he is who he is. I feel like one of the few politicians in this state that I feel like comes off that like that is Katie Wausau. Yes, no. That's California. Katie and Wausau, Rosenberg.
Yeah.
And I think she ran and she was so audaciously authentic, and she still remains to be so. That I think people just like her because she tells it like it is and she tries to get things done. But I think that is. I mean, it's hard to find people like that in general, let alone politicians.
But that's how you tune people in. Why? How many people watched the Big Brother finale the other day? I love Big Brother. It's fantastic. It's reality TV, but it's not like people like authenticity. Because in those reality shows, especially when you're isolated like that, after 2 weeks or so, you forget the camera's there and you really become who you really are. And you start acting like yourself, even more so. And that's what turns people on. And we complain about the Kardashians. We complain about, they're all popular and everything. Well, you know why? Because as much as they go and fake themselves out, they're actually kind of showing you people want to be brought in behind the scenes. People want to see the genuine versions of them. Even if it's a fake version of them that they're offering, my point is people want to see the reality. It's the idea that they're being brought into the authenticity. That's what turns people on. That's what I'm saying. It's the idea that they're selling their authenticity, but that's what is turning people on to them.
All right, I now realize why your show is called Dueling Tangents, because we didn't even get to the last topic that we were going to talk about the Wisconsin GOP suing Milwaukee. So maybe we'll talk about it a little bit when we come back. Otherwise, we're going to do the only day that we're talking about Jeffrey Dahmer today. So stay tuned for that. Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me and let me go off.
Have a good drive. We'll see you next week. Stay tuned. This is As Goes Wisconsin.
Yeah, I can't stop sometimes.
I was like, it was good. I just was like, well, this is one of the words that we're going to talk about. So there it is.
I've left the meeting.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I'm going to get out of here. You guys have fun.
All right.
I'll be back.
Monday?
I'll be back in like 45 minutes, but probably Monday.
Oh, because you're going to Verizon.
Yeah.
Got it.
But that'll be just dropping the thing off and leaving. And that is what I dropped. Oh, okay.
I can't get over, that's such a nice, I don't know, maybe it's just a shitty computer.
Do you like that one?
This one's amazing.
I know. I looked at it for like 2 seconds yesterday and I was like,
I looked at myself and I was like, oh wow, that is.
I unplugged the other. I was going to tell you when I got here, but I got here a little late. I unplugged it. I was like,
yeah.
Doesn't even need to use the other one.
Yeah, that one's really, really nice.
I'm excited for this next segment.
The Dahmer one?
Yeah. I have like so many thoughts. I'm excited to hear what he has to say.
I'm going to tweet that out right now. Here, if you want to post something like this on Instagram and Facebook, I'm texting it to you now, just to say, like, if you want to talk about Dahmer, we're doing it in this hour. Just whoever we can capture.
What do you think I should use as a visual for the Instagram story to post that?
Probably a Netflix Dahmer thing.
Okay.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin, Brey. I've been tussling if I even wanted to talk about this, and if we were going to talk about it, what interesting way we could talk about it would be, but we're going to do it. On today, and today only, we're going to talk about the Netflix Dahmer series. And if you have strong opinions on it, on the fact that you think this is a good thing for Netflix to bring it up in the different way that they're approaching the topic that hasn't been done before, if you think it's disrespectful, this is your chance to give us a text, give us a call, your feelings about the most streamed show on Netflix right now. Yeah, it's so 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. We would love to hear from you. We're going to talk about this the whole hour, at least the first half hour. Jane and I are going to give our thoughts. We would love to take calls and texts from people who have thoughts, because I know this is a fairly big debate right now, at least in Milwaukee, because obviously this affects Milwaukee. Happened in Milwaukee. People who had loved ones killed by Jeffrey Dahmer are still alive and have very strong feelings about this. The neighborhood where everything happened is still very underdeveloped as far as how the neighborhood has been, the resources available there compared to other parts of Milwaukee. Like the building itself is gone, but there's never been a memorial erected for the victims of Jeffrey Dahmer. There's so many layers to this, and so we would love to hear from you if you're angry about it, if you're learned things that you didn't remember or didn't know, and then in the second half hour, Dr. Ryan Martin, aka the anger professor, who's been on the show before, he's going to join us. He's a professor of psychology at University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, and he teaches a course on emotion. And in that course, he touches on horror films and thrillers and what is it about the human psyche that we like this type of true crime and reliving like the trauma of serial killers and what they've done and trying to get into their mind, because obviously this is bigger than just this one series, and that true crime itself is a massive industry. Not my cup of tea, but there's a lot of people out there who get very into it, and despite the fact that true crime means these are real crimes that happened as far as people getting killed horrifically, and now it's presented as entertainment. So have you watched it, Jane?
I watched. Okay, I skimmed.
You skimmed the show?
I skimmed the first episode. There were things I skipped.
Because you're like, no, thank you.
I knew that I would.
No, I know. And I mean, I'm interested in your perspective of what you remember from it, because I was in Madison and I was under 10 years old when this was happening. And it's one of those things where I feel like I knew Jeffrey Dahmer was from Wisconsin. I knew that he was from Milwaukee. I knew that he ate people. There's more, I would say, because it's not just the series, right? I can't go on I don't think it's just because I live in Milwaukee, but I can't go on any of my timelines on any social media without articles being written about this, and it's rehashing everything. And there's people there's conversations about, I saw one this morning from Annie Schwartz, who was one of the journalists who broke the story, and she has something in the Independent on what Netflix got wrong. There's conversations on whether this should have happened at all as far as Netflix producing it. There's everywhere I feel like this conversation is happening, and it's bigger than just the conversations in Milwaukee or Wisconsin. This is a national thing that's in the zeitgeist at the moment. And I will say there's things I've watched 3 episodes. I kind of like half-heartedly. Like I was working, they were on, Mike was watching them. And I don't know if I want to finish it because I feel torn in the same way. And I think as a performance, like if this wasn't a real story and Evan Peterson, who's playing Jeffrey Dahmer, was playing a fictional character with all the same plot points, he would be, he's excellent. He's an excellent actor. And so watching it from the performance aspects, I'm like, but it's still a real person. And it's still, he is a actor who I think, because in different roles, he's attractive and he's a young, talented actor. And so it's like by casting someone as up and coming and talented as him, are you glorifying the monster? Well, but I think there's a difference, like, because with the Ted Bundy thing, like that, if you're going to do the Ted Bundy story, that was part of Ted Bundy's, like, yeah, right? Like the whole part of it was like he was this attractive, charismatic psychopath that women were attracted to, and he used that. Versus, I'm not sure that's how Jeffrey Dahmer. It wasn't like it's not a charismatic thing. But I will say, what I feel like is really unfortunate, and I'm surprised that it's legal, is that Netflix didn't have consent from any of the families. Yeah. It's public record. And so there's been multiple family members who have said, so Rita Isbell, whose brother was murdered by Dahmer, was depicted in the show. So her likeness and her name and everything is in the show. And she said watching it, the recreation, felt like reliving it all over again. Quote, I was never contacted about the show. I feel like Netflix should have asked if we mind or how we felt about making it. They didn't ask me anything. They just did it. And I've heard some of my friends as they've been making commentary on this who did not have family members, but they remember living through it and they remember how poorly managed things were. And I think that's the one thing that the show is, from what I've seen so far, is doing well and is infuriating, is how much the neighbors who were predominantly Black, who knew something was wrong, were not listened to. Just flat out ignored. And I mean, they reenact at the end of, where was episode 2 or 3, a call after the police had walked a delirious 14-year-old boy back to Dahmer's apartment, and his neighbor Glenda, I can't remember her last name, but Glenda, they reenact the actual phone call of her following up with the police officer and being like, "Are you sure he wasn't a child? Are you sure he's okay?" And she's so adamant about it because she's so worried about this child that's not her child, but she knew something was wrong and just dismissed. Hi, Karina.
Hi. I know that every time I hear about Jeffrey Dahmer, my heart goes cold and horrible, and I don't want to hear about that anymore. But at the same time, I think we have to, because as you said, it brings so many dysfunctions in the society, in the healthcare, in the mental, in the profiling. It takes so many different degrees and us look at it, because it's still very wrong. We still have those situations on the street when a police thinks that it's a figure of authority to tell them what is in reality happening. Like, no, I just taking care of this child, or it doesn't feel good, or beating, or domestic abuse, or the Jeffrey himself. He was damaged, very damaged person, and suffering inside. That's why he was eating people, thinking about that he's gonna take them forever with them, and nobody ever gonna leave them. I mean, can you imagine to live with the understanding that you are the least little woman in this world, and no one wants. So it's a lot of issues. But
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, thanks you so much for the call, Karina. Get ignored. Well, I think that, yeah, and I think that's what it stood out to me as just the, we're talking about in the 90s, gay men and who were having sex with men. Yeah, and that was going to be my point. I mean, and in that reenactment of that call, you can tell that there was clear how uncomfortable the police officer was just with, because they were boyfriends, right? And he was very uncomfortable with that. And so if you take all these marginalized communities that were largely just not protected, so Black communities, poor people, the Hmong, gay men. At that point, is just like that point in history in Milwaukee. It was not taken seriously, and look what was allowed to happen. And so, but it's also like, do you need to fictionalize it? Hasn't there been documentaries on this? Isn't there a more respectful way to bring attention to such a horrific past besides casting and the yeah, and I think there's been losing my friend Jeffrey. Like, there's been stories about this, but we want to hear from you. We have to go to a break. We're going to keep talking about this. 844-967-2789. Your chance to air your gripes about this. Tell me why you think it's good that it's on air. We want to hear from you. 844-967-2789. This is As Goes Wisconsin, and we'll be right back. Do you have feelings?
Yeah, a lot of feelings.
You want to get on?
Yeah.
Okay. See if we get calls.
My mom was gonna call.
She should. Text her and tell her to call.
I sent her the number and everything, but she actually doesn't know how to use her phone. She was like, I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, come on. But yeah, she wanted to call because the 14-year-old boy, my mom knew him, and she would see him walking around the neighborhood. Jeffrey Dahmer offered my uncle a drink. A black man, and my uncle was an alcoholic. That was like, he got such a weird feeling from him that he was like, my mom was like, he would take drugs and alcohol from anybody but him. And they lived in the same building. Yeah.
I think that's the thing. It's like I've never had the experience of living in a place that is the part of the depiction of, because like I watched, what was that called?
The first one?
No, but it was a documentary. The Los Angeles serial killer documentary. Was it Hulu? City of Angels? Is that it? Night Stalker? Yeah, it was Night Stalker.
Oh, I watched that too.
The real life boogeyman, what was his name?
Something Ramirez or Richard Ramirez? That one?
Was it?
I think he was known as the Night Stalker.
As Goes Wisconsin, welcome back, Jane. Really? You could have just played something that was, yeah. This was one we didn't necessarily have to make the association with the bumper music, Jesus. Well, on that note, we are talking about the new Netflix series, Dahmer, and which is very popular. Over 196 million hours have been viewed since it premiered on September 21st. And like I said, this is Milwaukee plays a role in the series because obviously Milwaukee played a role in what actually happened and the police that were involved and the community that was involved. And this is the first time for me that I feel I'm living in a place where the retelling and the fictional version of what happened is being told and like seeing in real time how the people who lived through it, like Jane, you said you were working. Brooke, social media manager Brooke, her mom, you were telling me what you were telling me at the commercial break.
So my aunt, at the time that Jeffrey Dahmer was killing young men, lived in the same building. they had seen him multiple times. Everyone said the same thing. It's very different from like talked about earlier, Ted Bundy. Like everyone just felt very odd around him. My mom also knew the 14-year-old boy that got returned to Jeffrey Dahmer. She'd seen him walking. She knew he was a kid. My mom was an adult at the time. She knew he was a kid. She could tell he was
and like boys mature. I mean, there's sometimes when you see a 14-year-old girl and you're like, especially with makeup and stuff, you're like, oh, maybe she could be 18 or 19, but 14-year-old boys look like 14-year-old boys.
It's pretty obvious, but my uncle at the time was an alcoholic, a young black man. Jeffrey Dahmer offered him a drink, which is what he did to try to get young black men to come to his house or just out in general. And my mom put it in a way that was like, your uncle would accept drinks from anybody because he was sick, but he would not take a drink from Jeffrey Dahmer. And like my mom and my aunts talk about how they cannot imagine if he would have. And like we would have been the ones going through that, and my family would have been, and like even just watching the documentary and watching the neighbor and the young men that.
The documentary or the series?
Or the series.
So you have been watching it?
I have. I'm almost done with it.
How are you feeling?
So this has been like really difficult because I watch true crime. Like,
oh, so you like this genre?
Yeah.
So you're interested for the next segment when the professor's on?
Yeah.
Okay.
I watch true crime, but also this hitting so close to home, and then knowing that the families didn't give permission. I've been like, should I stop watching this? Mm-hmm. Should I not? And then it's also hard because I am watching this happen, and I'm like, the black community, we already have a lot of strikes against us, just moving through society every day, and to like find out, in that I wasn't alive then, but to find out that there was someone targeting young black men as if young black men aren't already targeted is like so terrifying. Like it's really scary. I really struggle with, because I'm like, I find myself getting like entrenched in the story, and I'm like, wow, like I feel like they're doing a really good job, but I'm also like, but these victims and their families, like they're just profiting off of this, and the families aren't getting anything. So it's a very, like, someone that enjoys watching true crime and just horror in general, it's like really confusing.
Does it make you change your mind on watching other true crime stories, knowing that so it's like this is the first time it's hitting so close to home?
Yeah.
That every other true crime story that gets maybe is not as wildly popular as this one, but it's someone's family, it's someone's loved one that was murdered and now is being depicted in a way and presented as entertainment.
Yeah. This has definitely made me question. I feel like, because the reason why true crime was so normalized for me is that my mom watches true crime. Everyone in my family, like, it's kind of just was always like a normal form of entertainment. And I think it always stemmed from, my mom is really into psychology. She wanted to go to school for criminal psychology. I wanted to do the same. And it always stemmed from a place of like, wow, someone actually has it in them as a human being to do this to other humans. And it's just like kind of this mystery that it's like how and why makes you just wonder. But I don't know, I've always, at least, some people would argue that you shouldn't watch true crime at all. But I've always felt like I've always indulged in forms of media that, like, YouTubers that really highlight victims or talk to the families. But this has made me think, like, maybe I should make sure that the things that I'm watching, it's, the family consents and it feels more ethical. Because this has really opened my eyes and made me like, maybe I should be careful of some of the things I'm watching and indulging in.
How do you feel about it after, is this bringing up feelings for you? But as far as the publicity and all of, because I would imagine that to a certain extent, it's everywhere right now, right? Like Milwaukee Journal Sentinel has multiple different articles out, but like having, I'm sure, talked about it and covered it in your job back then, is the publicity around the Netflix series bringing anything up for you?
And having to go through all of this, that's like the family out in the home is killed by the agent.
Oh, the how to make a making a murderer. Were they? That's one show I've never seen. But were they interviewed for that, or were they just abstained from being involved in that project? Yeah. I don't know why we watch this. So our next guest is Dr. Ryan Martin, who is a professor at UW Green Bay, and we're going to ask him questions on what it gives us and why we watch and subject ourselves to these kinds of horrors, knowing that they actually happened. So if you have a question for the professor, you can always join the conversation. You can give us a call as well, 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. We're going to take a break, but for the rest of the hour, we're still going to be talking about the new Netflix series and whether it's ethical for them to have made it and for us to have watched it. All right, stick with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin. If you want to stay on, you can ask them questions if you want.
Okay.
You're good.
Oh, God. Thank you so much for that hour. Bye. No, it's great.
I like how that lady who called talked about how like Jeffrey Dahmer didn't get help, and maybe like she was like, there were so many signs of him like when he was younger, and like everyone ignored it. No one was like, maybe this person needs some type of like intense like
how he liked to do the stuff with the fish and stuff.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people don't talk about that, so I like that she said that.
Mhm.
She's like, there's so many aspects that were ignored, like including his mental health.
Did you get any spots that you thought were good from Brian?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. I liked when you guys were talking about why you couldn't be in public office because of the things that you text your friends. That was funny.
That's part when he does his Russian accent too, and potentially his rant at the end. If any of those were good, because I thought it was like, well, this is not on top, but it's good. Hello, sir. How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am also well. Happy Friday.
Yeah, you too. This is fun stuff.
Yeah. Have you watched it yet?
I have not, and I'm not sure I will. But
yeah,
I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with horror / sort of thing that I'm happy to talk about if it comes.
Yeah. No, I feel like we'll just get into it. I'll offer the number again, and so if anyone texts or calls, we can take those as well, and just kind of see where the conversation takes us. But it's, I don't know if people are talking about it in Green Bay, but people are certainly talking about it in Milwaukee.
I asked my students about it yesterday, and of 45 students, almost the entire class said they'd seen it. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, they're obsessed with it.
Oh, wow. All right, well, we'll get into it.
Yeah.
Is that Brian?
Yeah, he was waving. Should I mention the Ron Johnson thing in the blog post, or just should I mention the Ron Johnson segment in the blog post, or just start with Brian?
You can do it just because you can link the picture.
Okay.
And you're like, if you want to see the picture, give your thought. What do you think of the likeness? So the likeness is pretty like. I was like, well. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. This hour, we are spending the only time we're going to actually talk about this topic because I don't want it to dominate it because it's controversial in its own nature, and I don't want to add more fuel to the fire that's already happening. But we are talking about the Netflix Dahmer series that has premiered September 21st, and in basically a little over a week, already has 196 million viewing hours. It's probably even higher than that since when I got that number, I'm not sure which date that article was on. And we thought instead of just us going back and forth and is it right, is it wrong, should this have been left alone, we wanted to bring on the professor of psychology and anger researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, Dr. Ryan Martin, to talk to us more about why we enjoy watching such horrific things, whether they're fake or real. So welcome to the show. Welcome back, since this is your second time.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. I'm excited to talk about this with you.
So why do we do this?
It's a great question. And it really kind of runs contrary to what we expect or often think about with human beings. And this isn't the only example of this. We tend to think of human beings embracing sort of a hedonistic approach to emotions, right? That we seek out pleasure and we avoid discomfort, and that is how we expect people to operate. But ultimately, we know that's not true. And there's actually lots of examples of this, that human beings will embrace unpleasant emotions under various circumstances and will willingly invite unpleasant emotions under various circumstances. And we see it with people who like, obviously horror movies and things like that, but haunted houses, thrill rides, etc., right? People willingly invite things into their life that are scary, upsetting, anger-inducing, make them cry, whatever. So then the question becomes, well, why? Why on earth would we do that? What is the upside? And there's really a couple different possibilities that are all probably relevant. One is that some people might simply not find it upsetting, right? And that is that I think is probably the most troubling of the explanations, the idea that you wouldn't find this upsetting. There's good reason why some people might not find some of this upsetting under certain circumstances that we can unpack as we go here. That's one possibility. Two is maybe another conflicting emotion that encourages people to do it. So sometimes in some cases that's happiness, that's joy. And we see that with a lot of, maybe not with Dahmer, but with a lot of horror movies, that people they're experiencing enthusiasm, they're experiencing a lot of joy as they're also experiencing fear and terror. And then the third, and I should mention that, and this is, I think, the one that is really relevant here is curiosity. And curiosity is a fascinating emotional experience because you see that it is brought out of people when you expose them to gaps in their knowledge. And so just simply by making it clear to someone that they don't know something that you know, you can motivate curiosity in them. So what happens with a show like this is that as the whole world is watching it, which you alluded to before, it's people start to feel like they're part of an outgroup. It's like, why am I the only one not watching this? All of these other people know something or have seen something that I haven't seen. And so they get drawn into it for that reason. And then I think the third piece is a lot of people, and this is going to overlap, and this is the thing that I talked to my students about yesterday, is that it is worth it to them to experience these negative emotions because they get something out of it in the end, that they actually benefit from it or gain something from it. And so when I asked people about this, they said, specifically for the show, they said, I want to learn how to avoid things like that in my life. I'm scared, and this is teaching me how to avoid stuff. Some people just said, they're interested. I mean, these are psychology students. They're interested in the psychology behind it, what might have been driving him. I think there's a piece that for some people that's about credibility. It's like what I get from this is I get to tell people I saw it.
We're talking to Ryan Martin, who is a professor of psychology and anger researcher at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, about the new Netflix series Dahmer. So you guys had a lecture or a conversation about this yesterday?
Yeah.
How did it go?
It was great. So I teach a course on mental illness, and we were talking actually about phobias yesterday and fear. And, typically fear has a very predictable pattern associated with it. When people are scared of things, they tend to avoid those things. And so it came up pretty naturally as we were talking about this. And I asked, how many of you have watched this show? And almost the entire class, 40 plus students, raised their hand and said that they were watching it. Handful of outliers. And so I said, I essentially posed the same question we're asking here. Why? What are you getting from it? I will tell you, the actor is driving a lot of this. A lot of them said specifically that they are interested in him. They think he's really talented and like the way he looks, and so they wanted to check it out. But above and beyond that was really this kind of morbid curiosity piece of I'm intrigued by the topic. I want to know more about him and his life. And I get the curiosity thing is the part for me that I feel like if I fell into any of those buckets, I feel like I'm a fairly naturally curious person, and potentially filling the gaps between what I already knew and how they're approaching the topic. And I will say, in the 3 episodes I have watched, I did learn more, because it's not a topic, because I'm not a true crime fan, because I don't research serial killers. I knew the name, I knew the general plot points of the story, but a lot of the details I didn't know. And I will say, I think one of the things I do think is interesting is what we said before in the last segment, is the credit and the acknowledgement of the community that was not listened to, and what a gross oversight that was, and how much could have been, how many people could have been spared had they been listened to. And so I think that part for me is interesting. But it comes, and it's this show, but I know that I watched, and wasn't fictional, it was a documentary, but the Night Stalker documentary on the serial killer in LA. And I don't know, is there a difference between, and this gets into ethics more than psychology, but like when it's a documentary versus a fictionalized, we're putting a famous, well-liked actor to portray a monster and give him some humanity, because that's also what the show is doing, right? It is depicting him in a way of a broken home, and he had these instincts from a very young child that went unchecked and ignored, and you give, it almost creates empathy or sympathy for someone who probably doesn't deserve any. Right. And so is that part of it as well, is like the curiosity of trying to figure out these people and how they could do such things, and identifying with them or softening them? Mm-hmm. I think it is. I think that a colleague of mine teaches a course actually on monsters. It's a first-year seminar here that he teaches on various monsters throughout history. He is a biologist, and he brings me in to actually talk about about human monsters, essentially, for one day, right? And so I come in and I just talk about serial killers with them, and some of the things we know and don't know. And what is so fascinating, though, is how much students, these are 18-year-olds by and large, how much they already know about this topic, that there is something really driving their interest in this particular topic. And I think it comes with, in some ways, I think some of this is inspired by age, not entirely, but I think as human beings develop, they become more aware of sort of the real life consequences of this, and it's harder to detach from what really happened. As you get older, I think you start to realize, like, look, these were people's children and spouses and siblings, and they had people who love them. I think when you're younger, it's easier to forget all that and enjoy this. So I think that sort of drives some of this. I agree with you. Like, this is not typically, by and large, a genre for me. I am interested in human beings and human behavior, and so I find myself caught up in that side of it. I have a hard time, though, for all of the reasons you mentioned, really engaging in this media.
Go ahead, Jane.
I can't hear her. I'm sorry.
Oh.
No.
No, for some reason you can't hear Jane. That is odd.
I'm curious. To calm ourselves and say there is an explanation.
So she's asking if we watch shows like this to try to actually create a calming sense of trying to figure out why people do these things. Mm-hmm. Either, as you said, so you can avoid people like this, or just because sometimes as humans, we need an answer. Like, how could this happen?
Yep. I think that is a big part of what we're talking about for many people. It is in some ways, it's like you want to know that this person is an outlier, and that there is a very clear explanation for what happened and why they did this thing, as a way of feeling safer yourself. I also think that it's, in some ways, it's driven by a desire to have strategies to protect yourself. It's like you can't protect yourself if you don't know what's out there, and so people are motivated by that.
How much have you studied? And stay with me, because I think about when you said monsters, and we think about human monsters. I think, on one hand, the obvious answer is serial killers, of which there are plenty of documentaries. What was the Mind Hunters? Was that the show that was on Netflix for a little while? That was a lot of these people. Mm-hmm. I also think of dictators who were at the head of mass genocides. Mm-hmm. Is that a similar profile of person, or are those two very different types of mass murderers?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think we run into a lot of definition problems, because there's a lot of, serial killers are anyone who commits multiple homicides, right? And so that could include a lot of people that we don't typically think of as, right? So people who do this for employment, right, as part of their
assassins,
drug cartel, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I suspect there's more of a link between them and who you're talking about because when we think about the sort of stereotypical serial killer that we tend to cover, your Dahmers, your Bundys, your Green River Killer,
people who are getting like a psychological thrill out of killing someone and covering it up.
Yeah, those seem to be motivated by very, very, very different patterns of behaviors, even from each other, right? So, I think a lot of people look at someone like Dahmer and they think, like, this is a person who really was likely had a borderline personality disorder or something akin to that, whereas someone like Bundy was maybe more likely to be antisocial. So there's different patterns of behaviors that might be associated with some of those, depending on who they are.
Well, this is all very interesting. If you have questions, you are free to call in. You're free to text us, 844-967-2789. For the next segment, Dr. Ryan Martin will still be here to talk about our attraction to horrific entertainment. So if you want to join the conversation, please do so. We'll take a break. This is As Goes Wisconsin. Do you have a question for him?
Not yet. don't know. I'm just thinking about like, cause I remember like being in middle school and telling people like, oh, I like love watching scary movies or I watch this all the time. And they'd be like, what? Like, why do you do that? And I was like, oh God, what's wrong with me? Why do I watch that kind of thing? But I think he's like, I mean, I figured it out later in life. I was like, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. A lot of people do this, but he's answered a lot of the questions I've already had. I think my mom said she was gonna text. She said she tried calling, but she said it was a busy line. I think. I don't know. But then she said she sent a text or was gonna send a text.
Do you want to try again?
It does, Jane. It does say you're muted on my screen, by the way. I don't know because I could.
She's doing. What is she doing? Can you hear me?
I can.
Do you want to try, Jane? Do you want to try seeing if he can hear you now?
I can't. I can hear you coming in through a different microphone, like it's coming in through someone else's.
Well, we're in a different room, so that's weird.
Yeah, it's very, very quiet though.
All right. Jane, do you have any other questions that I can ask him? No? Okay. Where else do you want to go with the conversation, Ryan, in case we don't get any texts or calls?
You know, one thing that I think is actually fascinating here that you might want to talk about is that, so with non-true story horror movies, one of the big differences between people who like them and people who don't is your ability to disconnect, to remember it's fake. And so like some people are better at that than others. And but that's what makes this so particular, so interesting, right? Because we know this is a true story. And so it shouldn't be possible for people to disconnect the way they are, the way they're able to.
Okay. That's a good one.
Oh, I guess
Do you got one?
I guess the only question I would have, I don't know if you can hear me.
He can't hear you, but you can ask me.
The only question that I guess I would have is like,
I can hear her, by the way.
Oh, all right, we gotta go.
Okay,
Oh.
I'll try to remember.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. This half hour, we are joined by Dr. Ryan Martin, who is a professor of psychology and an anger researcher at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay. And we are talking specifically about the Netflix series on Jeffrey Dahmer that was released in the last week and a half, but more broadly on why this is such a massive genre that gets so many people's interest, whether it's true crime in general, but true crimes almost usually act like documentaries, if I understand it correct. But I guess if this falls under the true crime, even though it's a fictionalized version of a true story, and does that make a difference in how we consume information? Because obviously when we watch, let's say Jordan Peele's Get Out, right? A story that is a fictional story. This is not based on real events, though it's titillating because there's truths in it that we recognize, unlike in this situation with a script. It's not like it's not a documentary where there was interviews and those interviews were pieced together to tell a story in that kind of art form. This is a script that was based off of real events, but we took liberties because that is how you make a biopic. And do we consume that differently as far as our connection to remembering that these were real people?
Yeah, we do. And this is actually one of the things that makes people's appreciation for Dahmer and for other types of true crime a little more confusing for me, because it's actually, I think, relatively easy to understand why a lot of people enjoy just straight up non-true horror. They like it because it's exciting. There's enthusiasm there. They are able to, psychologically speaking, they're able to convert that excitement into positive feelings. They're able to consistently remember this thing isn't real. right? And that makes it easier for them to find enjoyment in it. In fact, when we ask people ultimately who really like horror when they don't like it, so when does horror go wrong for you? Usually it's too close to home, felt too real, something like that. So a lot of people who like horror actually don't like really like gory
True crime.
Yeah, true crime or documentaries, that sort of thing. And so that makes this a little more unusual. There's actually a really interesting study out there once but 2007, where people who don't like horror were asked to watch horror movies, but they did so with the IMDb profiles of the actors on the screen with them. So they were constantly reminded that this was a movie, and just sort of bombarded with the idea that this was a movie. And what they found is that they enjoyed it more than they did when those weren't there, that constant reminder allowed them to disconnect from the media in this way, that they enjoyed it more. So liking horror is oftentimes it's a skill of being able to disconnect from any reality or remember that it's not real. People shouldn't be able to do that with Dahmer, with other types of true crime. You shouldn't be able to disengage from it that way, unless you're able to say, this happened in the past, it's not happening now. But even that's probably a little naive.
But isn't it to a certain, and this is what I feel like the difference, because where we started the conversation at the top of the hour before you joined was more of an ethics conversation as far as Netflix greenlighting this project without consulting with any of the families or any of the people who are more connected to the story. And even journalists who covered the story were not consulted, and it was just, we're going to make this. And when you place actors playing real people, doesn't it ultimately invite the when you're viewing it, making that disassociation of like, this isn't real, this is just actors, and actually unlike a documentary, and which is pictures and testimony, and versus like, well, this is just like every other movie I see.
Mm-hmm. I do. I think you're actually, in some ways, you're cutting viewers a little bit of slack there, or you're sort of letting them off the hook a little bit by almost sort of pretending it's not real, or that it's loose, sort of that the basis is looser, versus seeing the actual, like you said, documentary footage of it. And I think that, I question the ethics around this as well, personally, and not just this, but true crime in general. I think that's one of the reasons why I don't typically engage in it, is because I worry about the exploitive nature of what we're talking about. It makes me really uncomfortable. I'm not able to, and I don't want to be able to do this, to disengage or disconnect from the victims. That I can't watch that without thinking about them and their families and their lives. And I don't want to be able to watch it without thinking of those things. But I suspect that might be a reason why I don't appreciate this when other people do, that they might be better able to do those things.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't think it's going away. I think I still have very mixed feelings of whether or not I want to finish. Now that I've talked about it once, maybe I don't have to finish it, because it was part of, like you said, it's part of the zeitgeist and the curiosity. Quelling your curiosity as far as learning more about the story, but also if everyone else is watching it, what am I missing out on? And what do I have to watch this to be part of the conversation? But I don't know. I'm not sure if we solved anything as far as, but it is interesting to hear why we do that, especially as at least Jane and I, Brooke just said that she spends more time watching true crime, but it's certainly not something that I'm like, oh, I have to watch this. But it is interesting as far as the viewing habits. I read something recently as far as why there's certain people who have higher anxiety who are more likely to be the type of person who just rewatches the same show again and again and again. And they watch, whether it's The Office or Parks and Rec or these feel-good shows, and they know what's going to happen, but it brings them comfort because they know what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no getting around the idea that there are comfort shows out there that we, and I think that's actually not just predicted by type of people, but stage of life and what's going on and how much stress you might be under at a particular time. There's something to be said for knowing what's going to happen in a world that feels really out of control to you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking time to spend with us today to explain why we do the things that we do. Ryan Martin is a professor of psychology and an anger researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. You can find him across all social media platforms at Anger Professor. He's a very good follow. That's how we originally met, was on the social medias. But thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thanks for being here and thanks for doing the great work you do. Love talking to you.
Yep, we'll bring you back soon. All right, well, we're going to take another break. And when we come back from the news, we're going to talk about the correlation between voting and saving the arts. Stay with us. This is As Goes Wisconsin. This is another one that I was like, ooh, I don't know if I have a full half hour of questions to ask her, but we'll see.
It worked, and I'm not sure why it didn't.
What'd you say?
Brian texted me when he couldn't hear me on Zoom, and so I did what he said, and that apparently didn't rectify it. There are these automatic settings that someone dicks with. So my host mic was down for the Zoom settings, and then so I don't know. We'll see when she checks in. Let me see if she can hear me. Otherwise, I'll stay out. What a wild story,
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Let's see if you can hear Jane because we were having issues before. Can you hear Jane? No.
Nope.
Well, someone touched a button and we've been left to our own devices, so Jane will have to telepath her questions to me. And so because she usually has questions as well. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm good. And you?
I'm also good. You know, look how far things have changed since you and I first talked.
Oh my gosh. And here you are.
And here I am.
A
And now I live in
married lady.
Milwaukee. I'm married. I live in Milwaukee.
Congratulations. Okay, let me just ask this question. This wasn't the guy in LA, right?
This was not the guy in LA.
Okay.
This is a good Wisconsin boy.
Okay. You
Who's
went back.
from
You went to your roots.
Went to my roots. I joke because the guys, I had dated a lot of different people because I'm not a spring chicken. And I said, lo and behold, I just dated a good old white Wisconsin guy.
Yep. If anyone had told you that was what was going to happen, you would have said, "Oh no."
Oh no. Yeah.
No.
And so, but yes, I'm very happy. So,
Well,
but we can get into
wonderful.
all that. We'll talk
Yes,
about how
yes.
you and I first met. So when we come back in about 2 minutes, we go until 1:18, and then Jane will give us the countdown, like 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then we'll break from 1:18 to about 1:20, and we come back and we have like 8 minutes.
Okay. I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about.
What was the name of the software that you put on? For the new camera.
I just typed in the name Insta360. I just typed in whatever the
360.
does that come up?
No, I'm trying to see where the apps are.
Because it just automatically, when it was plugged in, just came up.
Oh,
I didn't
okay.
have to download it or anything.
Well, because I feel like it like went down.
Actually, what I did was I typed in camera to find it. I remember I couldn't find it, and then I was like, if I just go to the camera settings, maybe. And then I opened that, and then I knew it was that because it moved. And then I just kind of
Wow.
you have to close the
Well, welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin, Brey. We are in our last hour of the week. We're almost to the weekend, which is very exciting because that's when I get to sleep in. Because other days I do not sleep in. But this week, or this half hour, we are joined by Ann Katz, who is the director of Create Wisconsin, the state's community cultural development organization. She's experienced the arts in every corner of the state. She wholeheartedly believes that every citizen should take advantage of the right, power, and privilege of voting, and has worked as a nonpartisan election official since she was a teenager. And what we're going to talk about today is exactly that, the combination of the overlap, I should say, of voting and the arts. Because I don't know if everyone would always imagine that those two things have a lot to do with each other.
Right. The arts and everything else. And
Exactly.
voting
So
is one
welcome
of
to the
those
show,
things.
Ann.
Well, thanks for having me, Kristin. I appreciate it.
I'm so excited because you were one of my first contacts when I first got back to Wisconsin in 2020. And at that point, Create Wisconsin was actually called Arts Wisconsin.
Right.
And you were helping me navigate how I was going to potentially try to find some funding or some money as far as how I could keep the project going. And you were so enthusiastic and lovely. And I've been on your newsletter since. And when you sent out a newsletter on National Voter Registration Day, I was like, oh, let's get Ann on the show to talk about how important it is to elect people who support the arts.
One of my favorite topics.
So let's just back up a little bit and explain, for someone who doesn't know what Create Wisconsin is, what is the work that, because it's a lot of different programs. What is the work that Create Wisconsin does?
We are the state's community cultural development organization, and that means that we do advocacy, service, and development about and with and for everything connected to the arts, culture, and creativity in every corner of Wisconsin. So we do everything from lobby the legislature, and we're a nonprofit. We're a 501c3 organization, but we have parameters under which we lobby the legislature, and we're very careful to make sure we follow all of those rules. But nonprofits can advocate, so that's one of my topics too. We do a lot of strategic planning, a lot of cultural planning, a lot of talking about the mission, vision, and purpose of an organization, the future, how a community can use the arts for economic, workforce, and civic development. And of course, the most important thing is how everybody can participate in the arts, because really at the heart of what we do is the idea, and this is part of the Wisconsin idea and part of our progressive traditions, that everybody is creative in some way, and everybody should have the opportunity to participate in the arts, whatever that means to them. Wherever you live, however old you are, whatever amount of money you make, there should be arts activities everywhere in the state, and you should have that creative opportunity. So we get very involved in policy issues. We work in education because every kid deserves to have the arts in their education. We are really a service organization that tries to help in as many different ways as possible. So we work with nonprofits, big organizations, small organizations in rural Wisconsin, local government, economic development. We're kind of at the middle of all of the things that are happening.
You got a lot going on.
Which is really fun. It's really fun, actually.
And so when it comes to, because we're talking about voting and we're talking about our elected officials. So when you say lobbying, because I feel like that gets a bad rap sometimes. And so I know you, and so I know that you're not doing anything shady while you're lobbying. But
try not to.
But yes, but when we talk about lobbying, it's a really big umbrella. So for Create Wisconsin, what does that look like?
Well, so it's mostly education. Mostly our job is to go forth and educate people about the fact that the arts are a very big thing. Everybody has a different definition of what it means to be an artist. Everyone has a different appreciation of the arts. In fact, especially with visual art, I'm a performer and a singer by inclination and training. And so the more I really don't know anything about visual arts, and the more I see what's out there in the world of the visual arts or anything creative, I'm in awe of what people come up with. I don't ever get into a conversation about what is art or who's an artist, because that's not my job, because it's a very personal and a very widespread concept. But when we talk about lobbying, we do contract with lobbyists to work with us on legislative issues. They're important, but that's a fairly small amount of what we do. Really, we're out there to educate the arts world, the general public, people who make decisions, whether they're elected officials or some kind of civic leader. We're out to educate people about the importance of the arts and make the case. And this is why we're Create Wisconsin. And we've moved on, although we're the same organization, we've moved on from Arts Wisconsin. We're making the case that the arts are not separate. They're not over here in the corner, and then everything else in the real world is over here. We're marching forward with the idea that the arts are everywhere, everybody is creative, and that everybody should be able to benefit. And that Wisconsin should be able to take this huge amount of creativity that we have. It's in abundance everywhere, and make the most of it. So it's really education. We're really kind of proselytizers for the arts as, a fundamental part of what makes us human, and really fundamental to the growth and success of Wisconsin in the 21st century.
I forgot when we talked about this, but Jane and I, both lovers of the arts, both performers, I think in our core nature. And July, August, there was an article that highlighted, at least in Milwaukee, for the state of how much money the different performing arts has lost through the pandemic, as far as I think it's UPAF, as far as the United Performing Arts
Foundation.
Thank you. And how this is a critical year for them and so many of their 14 member organizations. And we ended up reading off on how beneficial, I think I actually got it from the Create Wisconsin website, of all the different things that the arts do for society and why it matters and why we should invest in them. And so when you look at the current state of the arts and creativity and what it takes to keep them thriving in the state of Wisconsin, how does it look?
Multi-layered.
Well, we got time. We got 5 minutes till break.
Right. That's right. It is true that our per capita funding of the arts through the Wisconsin Arts Board is very, very low. We are 49th, maybe 50th in terms of per capita funding, when our sister state, Minnesota, has gobs of money because they have a sales tax amendment that provides a lot of money for conservation, clean water, and the arts. So the Arts Board has not a lot of money to give out, but it gives it out judiciously, and people use it judiciously. So that's definitely one of our education and advocacy foci to help raise that. Again, I keep kind of gushing about this, but it is truly amazing what people do with not a lot of resources. I mean, nobody has enough money, even Minnesota. No one's ever going to have enough money. But like every business, like every person, like every community, things have been tossed up in the air with the pandemic and are now kind of settling down. We're creating this new world, and we're building the bike as we drive it, as we ride it, right? Because even though we think we're back to normal, who knows? This is a new world now. And so arts organizations and people who are creative workers did amazing things to keep going, like everybody. But when there were no jobs, when theaters were closed, and when people could not make their living in a way that they came up with creative ideas that are pretty astounding. Now the world is opening up again, and we have to it depends on how the pandemic goes. It depends on how lots of things go, but there is a certain people might be slow in going back inside to see a show. Certainly outdoor stuff has done great in the weather that we have.
Yes.
But again, theaters and museums and every other arts entity have been really creative to work with the situation that we find ourselves in, whatever day it is, right? Donors have been very generous. Certainly there was a lot of stimulus money from the state and federal government. And so all of those things put together kind of have kept people going. Now we're advocating for the fact that money, that emergency money is gone, and we're all going to have to make sure that our treasured institutions can keep going, whether they're large organizations or whether they're small. We have to make sure that support is there. So that's a big part of our education and advocacy, that we make the case that, what do we need to come back together again? The arts, creativity. So it's both a completely crazy and scary time and a very opportune and exciting time, because the world is open to us. We have to figure out how to move forward.
So I want to ask this question so you can think about the answer, because we won't have enough time for you to answer it before the break. But when you talk to, whether it's politicians or donors, but making the economic case for the arts, because I think for those of us who already know emotionally what they do, both to partake or to watch or view them, but there is an economic case for investing in the arts. So when we come back, I want to hear your thoughts on that. And then we'll also talk about, when voting, if you like and want to preserve the arts, what to look out for when you're voting. Our guest for this half hour is Ann Cates, who is the executive director of Create Wisconsin. Stick with us through the break, because she will still be here when we come back. This is As Goes Wisconsin. All right, somehow I screwed up the camera. It was following me.
Okay.
And my name also changed. So I don't know if because I had changed Kristin, but see how it's up now?
Yeah. So you should turn off your Zoom camera,
Okay.
and then go to the other camera that was like the one that you went to before,
Okay.
and see what I was doing yesterday was I just kind of
HDR. And then settings, pro mode, quality. Is it following me though? There was something before as far as it was like following me. Oh, why did I guess I thought I had more time. Focus.
there you go.
Okay. Switch to video mode. What did we do? Document.
I wonder if I wonder if my go-to is always unplugging it and plugging it back in, but I don't know if that will.
I don't know if that will do anything.
It says it has gesture control, but I don't really know how to.
Why won't that work? It was working so well, and then it just like died.
Tracking mode.
Pro mode.
So it says, when your face is in the frame, make this gesture until the camera's blue light flashes rapidly. Putting your hand up. Oh. That might have done it.
All right, let's try this.
Oh, you have to get out of camera first.
Oh yeah.
No, you just have to.
Okay.
Is it good now?
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. This half hour, we are talking to Ann Katz, who is the director of Great Wisconsin, about all things arts, visual, performing, music, writing,
Everything.
in Wisconsin, everything. And so before we went to break, I asked about when talking to politicians or donors or people who make decisions and fund things, when making the economic case for why we need to invest in the arts, what does that sound like, and how often is it received?
Well, we say it a lot. So of course, as I said before, I have to preface that by saying the reason the arts are important is because the arts are important. Humans have been expressing themselves creatively since the beginning of time. You can't stop that creative spirit. And so that's why the arts are important. And the really good news is that in the 21st century, as not only our economy has shifted, but now we've had this global pandemic that has just completely, made a whole new world. The economic impact and the economic worth and importance of the arts really cannot be overestimated. So the numbers that we use are from the US Department of Commerce, which has taken 35 different creative industries and put them in a computer program and jumbled them up, and has come out with, for 2020, 9.6 billion with a B, in economic impact in terms of those creative industries in Wisconsin. I know those are good numbers. And though those industries encompass over 96,000 jobs, which are more jobs than the beer, biotech, and paper-making industries in the state. So historical and up-and-coming industries that we already do invest in. So those numbers, and I say this, every day I say this to somebody, or many times, those numbers get attention. People's ears pick up. And then when you talk to people about their communities, their specific communities, everybody can see what's happening in their community. No matter what side of the aisle on, no matter where you live, you can see the changes happening even before the pandemic. And now, obviously, since the pandemic has happened. So people know what's happening. Every mayor wants to get young people to come to their community or stay in their community. Every educational system has to change in some way. So to recognize creativity, and everybody wants to bring people together in their community in some way. There are very few people who don't appreciate that the benefits of the arts in that way. And so, I've been everywhere in the state, which has been the greatest part of my job. And I can tell people this is happening in your community. It's happening in that community. Everybody's trying to figure it out together. You should talk to each other. But the economic impact is critical. And I don't hold with people who say, oh, we just want to talk about, the meaning of the arts and why they make us human. I do want to talk about that. But when we're trying to get money, so that there can be access to the arts, then we have to make the economic impact because all of that it's all combined. It's not separate from the intrinsic value of the arts. So we've got the arguments. We just have to keep pushing them.
Absolutely. I recently was talking to someone who's trying to advocate to bring the tax incentives back for the film industry to start making more stuff here. And I heard he told me that in the region, because most of our surrounding states have created these tax incentives, it's created 15,000 jobs in the region for the film industry, which is 5 times the amount of the region's beverage manufacturing and distribution industry. And so it's like the arts create jobs. And
the arts
sometimes
are
you
jobs,
have to,
right.
The arts are, and so talking about it in that way, sometimes for people who, won't cry at Les Miserables like I will later this year when the show comes back, there's also value in it besides just the emotion. And so
right.
With the time we have left, though, Create Wisconsin does not endorse anyone. But as far as when you're looking for policies and politicians and what they prioritize, what would you tell voters if they want to support the arts to look out for on their ballots?
I would say to voters to make sure that they have a relationship and a connection to the people they're voting for, especially on the local level, especially when you're voting for your mayor or for even the state legislature, or even, anybody else. Wisconsin's a pretty small state and we all know each other. But there is most legislators have some kind of creative outlet, or their kids are in ballet, or they sing in the church choir, or something like that. And so I really, first and foremost, tell people, know your legislator. They're pretty much they're a person just like you are, and they have likes and dislikes, and they want to know what you're doing because you're a constituent. And so, then you are able to decide your vote, not just on kind of a narrow view of something you might see in whatever media you look at, but also the whole person. And so, our education and advocacy is really all focused on building those relationships. It's all about relationships. People do things for other people when they have a relationship with them. You wouldn't, that applies in our families, on our friends, and it applies in politics too. And so, we push the idea of being involved in elections and voting because, again, the arts are part of everything. And if we're going to have a creative state, then an informed citizenry and people who are engaged in their communities that's essential. And so voting is one of those, as crazy as our democracy feels these days, we still have the right privilege and opportunity to vote. And so as we're advocating for people to be involved in their community creatively or any other way, voting is incredibly important, and paying attention to the issues of the day is incredibly important.
Absolutely. And so with the 1 minute we have left, is there anything else you want our audience to know about Create Wisconsin, or anything else you guys have coming up?
Well, I would like people to go to createwisconsin.org and learn about the arts, think about your community and things that you might want to do creatively, and give me a call, send me an email, and I'm happy to talk or visit or help in some way.
If you couldn't tell, Anne is very friendly, and she will absolutely kill you. I contacted her, and I think we were talking within like the next 5 hours. We were talking on the phone together, so she will answer your email. Anne, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Anne Katz is the director of Create Wisconsin. Go to createwisconsin.org, check it out, support the arts, and vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kristin. Take care.
We'll take another break, and this is Ask Us Wisconsin.
Thank you. So much fun.
One thing I might start having you help me with is, it should come from my email. I need to start getting better at sending thank you emails to people who come on.
Okay. We can like.
Hello. Did you turn me down? No. I thought she turned me down.
I don't know. I got really quiet. I don't know.
I did get quiet. I don't know why.
I can like draft a thank you email, then obviously depending on the person, just change the name and stuff like that. Just like a.
Yeah, if we had like a template or something, that'd be good. But it's also the. It also just comes down to me being like, I got to do it.
Yeah.
Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin, Brey. We are in the last half hour of the show. Friday. Almost the weekend. You got plans for the weekend? Don't they just die on their own? I need to call my mom and ask her what I need to do as a new homeowner. Well, we inherited like a little plot of, I think, perennials that I think we just leave alone, or we cut them back or something. I don't know. To FaceTime with Debbie and have her tell me what to do. Next year we will have a more impressive plant garden situation. That is a next year problem of home ownership. This year we're just trying to fix the inside. Are you a big podcast person? Oh, really? Is us? And I don't know how much it is generational. Well, today's International Podcast Day. That's why I'm bringing it up. And it's funny because I got married on National Radio Day. But yeah, today is International Podcast Day. And I recently saw a Vulture article claiming podcasting has just become radio. And so I'm interested for the audience, if you're listening, how do you think podcasting is different from radio? And if you're listening right now, you're probably listening to the radio. And what do you get out of podcasting that's different from why you would tune into a radio station? Like, I think it's interesting because before I never thought I was going to get into radio. I was a visual video person. I made TikToks and YouTube videos. And it was only through the invitation to be a guest, a regular guest on Steve Scaffidi's show on WTMJ, that radio even became an idea. While podcasting, for about 8 weeks, I think I had podcasts, but it was too much work. Because the thing with podcasting is it became almost like how YouTube is, where there is the barrier to entry all of a sudden became lower for anyone to have a podcast, and you could just start one instead of having to be hired to do one. But it's erupted. Right. And it's interesting because is it a different art form as far as creating a good podcast versus creating good radio? Is it, if it's just talking to people, one has more commercials than the other. And so I'm interested for people who are listening, if they functionally feel like they get something different listening to podcasts than they can get listening to the radio. And so if you want to give us a call, 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. What do you feel like you get out of radio that is different than a podcast, or vice versa? Or are they basically just both audio mediums that you listen to because you don't have to read or watch? And so while you're driving and you're working out and gardening, it's just an easier medium to consume. And I feel like I would ask you, but you've only listened to us, which is basically the radio as a podcast. Yeah. Voicemail. That's an interesting that is the distinction. And I agree with you. The article, as they're laying it out, is making the claim that now that podcasting has ballooned, everyone's got one. So this was an interesting statistic. So really what they say is the podcast Serial, which came out in 2014, which was, an audio almost it was an investigative series reopening the case of Adnan Syed, who just actually was released, and looking into his case because he was accused, charged, and convicted of killing his ex-girlfriend and classmate. But the series really went into like all of the weird things about the case and opened up all of these questions of, did he really do it, and how mismanaged the whole situation was. And it was within a month, it was 10 million downloads. And this was at a point when podcasting was not a huge thing yet. People had podcasts, but it was not what it is now. I think at the time, the major platform where people had podcasts was called Libsyn. There was like 22,000 shows. Guess how many shows Apple has today? Apple Podcasts. Did you look at my notes? That's exactly right on the money. 2.5 million podcast shows. That's not episodes. It's just individual shows of people who publish a podcast and post it into the cloud, as we talk about on Apple. And Spotify claims that they have twice as many. And so I don't even want to think about how you break through the noise of having people and find an audience. But their argument is that some of the early podcast series that got so much attention, because the other one after Serial, and I listen to both. I listen to Serial, and then I listened a couple years later to S-Town, which was not really, I can't even really explain it. It was basically just this guy who was very quirky and weird, and he was an unremarkable person who lived kind of a remarkable life in the Deep South. And it was another series that was artsy, and just really the production value was great, and the thoughtfulness around it was great. And I feel like the art form of podcasting and what you can achieve with sound and actual production quality and storytelling as that art form versus just an interview podcast, which is what a lot of them are, is getting lost. And this is what the articles is arguing, is why it's like radio now, is because largely, and you can probably speak to this more, what commercial radio started to focus on was big names. And that's how you created audience, was you just kind of had these like Howard Stern, Rush Limbaugh, larger than life characters carry the show, and the audience was there to listen to these, celebrities. And largely now the shows that have the most audience are celebrities interviewing other celebrities, like Joe Rogan, Mark Maron. I mean, and he had a podcast. He started in like 2009, so he was kind of an OG in all of this. But I would say the podcast actually made him famous versus the difference of, I think it's called Smartless, which is Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, Sean Hayes. So 3 comedic, successful actors basically interviewing other celebrities. The only person who's been able to outrank Joe Rogan on the Spotify podcast atmosphere universe is Meghan Markle. Yeah. And so, it's people tuning in the same way they buy People magazine every week. It's like, what do these celebrities have to say versus, and that becomes the premium versus the quality of using the art form in the way that it is. And so that was the argument as far as podcasting is becoming radio, because the money and the attention is just going towards the most famous name. But I think you're right in that it will never actually be like radio, because you can't call in live. It is like the difference of a live show on TV versus I can watch this whenever I want on streaming. We can't even list all the things, all the different ways you can watch us and get involved.
And so I still think that the radio that we use more directly than any other medium out there is, and you can reach us.
And do you think that's why people, because I was surprised, I say this a lot, but in Madison, I didn't feel like talk radio was a big thing. I remember my dad listening to, when I was growing up, I remember my dad would listen to sports talk radio, and you always knew you were in dad's car because that's what was on, versus our car was, usually the compromise in the ar was 94.9, which was the oldie station, which is why I know an inordinate amount of lyrics of old songs. and it's like, sometimes like, how do you know that song? It's like 94.9. Because that was the compromise between my mom's smooth jazz and our like hits for like whatever the Kiss FM station was. But talk radio wasn't a thing. And so when I moved to Milwaukee and Southeast Wisconsin, and knowing what talk radio has meant and the influence it has had in this region of the state, kind of took me by surprise, because I, having been gone, like I knew podcasts were a big thing, but I was kind of in the mindset. Also, I didn't have a car, so it wasn't like I spent a lot of time in my car where that was what you did. Like I would download podcasts, I'd get on the subway or I'd walk or whatever in the different parts of the country that I lived in, but not realizing that specifically in this region, but also as I've learned more and more, as civic media is getting up and going across the state, how much Wisconsin and people in Wisconsin of all ages really still listen to the radio. And I'm interested if that is out of tradition or because of what you said, as far as the ability to interact and call in and feel connected and to the hosts, because it certainly was not something that I grew up with, or until moving back and until literally getting into radio, that I was even on my radar, despite it being one of the oldest but still active media and communication channels that we have, mediums that we have.
All my dating files, people do all of my document died, people do all you're in their kitchen, you're in their bathroom, you are in the car with them, and there is a familiarity which is
Especially because it's every day. Because most podcasters aren't every day. Some do. I mean, some, I think, what do I listen to every day? So The Daily from New York Times does a daily podcast. That's why it's called The Daily. 20 minutes. So they're short, but they're very, the production value is very high. Yes. NPR, I listen to their Up First, but they're already doing radio. So it was kind of a natural, we'll just bookend it a little bit more and not necessarily have commercials in between it. I'm trying to think I think mostly the ones who do daily stuff are news organizations that are already putting, Vox has explained date, like Today Explained, but they're all short. They're certainly not 3 hours. Yeah. And it's interesting because people do listen to our show now as a podcast, and it's not right as of right now, it's not made to be a podcast. And so you hear us going to break or things that change and we hear callers. And so it is different. And so it's just, on this day, International Podcast Day, I thought it was interesting to explore the overlap, but still unique differences between podcasting and radio as the two dominant audio mediums that we still have. So if you have thoughts on it, we'd still love to hear from you. We're going to wrap up the show when we come back from this break, but you're always, because it's an interactive medium, you're always welcome to join the conversation. 844-967-2789. That's 844-96-PARTY. When we come back, we're going to do questions, as goes Wisconsin. Is she coming here? Where's she going? What's she doing? Oh, the book. All right, get on.
Oh, that's funny.
This is so good. Ooh. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin with Kristin Brey. We are almost done for the day, almost done for the week, almost done for the month. Next week will be the beginning of month 4 of the show. Is that possible? That is crazy. I feel like I'm starting to get the hang of it. Yeah, we're all just doing our jobs well. Eventually. All right. Well, one of the things that we're trying to make into a tradition of how we end the week is bringing out the big book of questions that Debbie Brey gave me that has been around for a while, but it is 3,200 different questions to ask your friends and family. It's a book called Talk to Me. And so social media manager Brooke is going to pick the first question. Maybe all the questions. We'll see.
The first question is, have you ever done something that made you look or feel like a total fool?
Daily? I wonder if feeling like at the time, did I feel like a fool? I think there was things I did as a kid that I look back at. I was like, how was I not wildly embarrassed? One of which, I don't even know if I can paint the picture. So I was in 3rd grade and we had this, our teacher, Mrs. Wardinger, had this really cute monkey puppet that she used in teaching. Monkey puppet. And it was adorable. And it was kind of like her little like teaching helper. And I volunteered to dress up as a monkey and come into my classroom and pretend I was the monkey puppet's like mom. And I like hooted hot around the classroom. And because Kristin was sick that day. And I volunteered to do this. I wasn't asked, I wasn't assigned. I was just like, yes, that sounds awesome. And I look back at it and I'm like, how was I not wildly embarrassed to just think that that was like how I wanted to spend my Thursday? Sure. Like I remember specifically I had like a rubber mask monkey thing, and I think I wore a little vest just like the puppet did. Like it was. What about you, Jane? Oh yeah, I do. Yeah. And the big head, small body advertisements. They're like platforms.
And it's just one of those things where you get up and you go,
Please don't touch me. No, I'm fine. I don't want to talk to anyone. Please just leave me alone. Just pretend you didn't see that. All right, I'm gonna run this way. Did you wear the shoes again? Never. Threw them away. Oh my gosh, Brooke.
Oh my gosh, actually, yesterday.
Yesterday, this is great. Okay.
Me and my roommate, this was a perfect question, and I hope she's listening to this because I know she's dying of laughter. Yesterday, so I do videography on the side. Me and my roommate, who helps me with shoots sometimes, we met with this older gentleman that needs help shooting a small ad. It's a place with a lot of older people, and we're like 20 something, and this man is a lot older than us, and I'm like, I know what everyone in this room is thinking. They're thinking that this guy's our sugar daddy. Like, I was like, for sure. So we go up to the bar. He's like, just put it on my tab. And we're trying to explain to the bartender that, oh, put it on this guy's tab. And he's just looking at us like back and forth. And he's like, can I see your ID? I'm like, he thinks we're either underage or that we are like just trying to get this old guy to buy us drinks. And we were so embarrassed because the guy was so frustrated with us. And we're like,
the guy being the bartender?
Yeah, so we're just trying to explain to him that, like, we're just having a meeting with this guy, and he's buying it, and he's like, okay. Like, he just wasn't having it. And I was like, this is so embarrassing. I know, I was like, why is everyone looking at us? Oh, that's probably why.
That's funny. I tried to think if I saw an older gentleman with two 22-year-old girls. I'd like to think that it would be in the realm of possibility that they're having a business meeting, but I don't know. I don't know if my mind would go there first.
Yeah. Well, it was also at a bar, too. He's wearing a suit and tie, and we're not. We're just dressed like very normal jeans, and I'm like, I feel like we look really juvenile compared to this man right now. And it was...
Well, and you also, because you're not on the Zoom right now.
Yeah.
You're 22, but you get carded a lot, I'm guessing.
I do. The only thing that helps is like having a few tattoos and a piercing. And like, sometimes that'll work.
All right, do we have time for one quick one more?
Yes. Tell us about your worst hotel or motel nightmare.
I don't know if I have one. Jane, do you have one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
My husband and I were in Turkey, and after many hours of searching this hotel that I had booked, we finally find it. We get to find a cab driver until we find it. Finally get there. This was the scariest hotel I've ever seen. This was the Turkish version of New Orleans, and he wanted us to make that first night, and that's the never design. And it's like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. I pushed all the furniture up against the door. It was that kind of, and then we slept on top of the sheets. I'm not talking.
So wait, did you only spend one night? And then where'd you go? Four Seasons? Oh my gosh, that is so funny. All right. Well, that's always fun. It's fun getting to know you too. Well, that's going to do it for this week. We have a big week next week. Obviously, we'll have more politicians coming on, other great guests, other great topics. But as always, we'd love to hear from you. So keep those calls coming, keep those texts coming. If you're listening to this on podcast, we'd love to email asgoeswisconsin@gmail.com if you have ideas, feedback, everything. But thank you for listening this week. Stay tuned for next week, and stay tuned for the rest of the day, because depending on where you are, you're either going to listen to Chad Holmes or Dueling Tangents. But these last 3 hours, you have been listening to As Goes Wisconsin. Have a great weekend.